Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Bella. I'm a director with the Carbon Business Council. We're really excited to be co-hosting the webinar today with the Climate Collective. And thank you to all of our panelists for joining, as well as the audience for participating today. In this webinar, we will be covering how digital infrastructure can help to strengthen the responsible growth of carbon removal in the Global South. We're joined here by Jack Polakar, Head of Innovation at the Climate Collective, Specios Muthu, who is Marketing and Communications Lead for Octavia Carbon, Neil Hacker, Head of Partnerships at Isometric, and Shrey Agrawal, Founder and CEO of Alt Carbon. So a collection of digital infrastructure companies as well as project developers working on carbon removal. We'll be going through a variety of themes today, ranging from the state of carbon removal in the Global South to how digital infrastructure can help to strengthen the responsible growth there. And then finally, other aspects of responsible deployment, such as co-benefits, local partners and engagement, and then wider intersections with digital infrastructure. We will leave about 10 to 15 minutes for an audience Q&A. So throughout this time, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We can answer them in the later half of the session. Or if at the end you'd like to save your questions and raise your hand, we can also have live questions asked during that time. As a quick introduction of the Carbon Business Council, we're a nonprofit trade association of more than 100 innovators in the carbon management space that work on essentially carbon removal. We are tech neutral, so we support a variety of carbon removal approaches as well as big tent. And so our membership encompasses not only project developers, but also marketplaces, a lot of those who do digital infrastructure and more. This has been an ongoing series with the Climate Collective on topics at the intersection of digital infrastructure and carbon removal. So we are excited to be talking about the Global South today in regards to that. I would like to allow each panelist to do a 1-minute introduction of themselves so you can hear more. And we will turn it over to Jack first with the Climate Collective.
Thank you so much, Bella. Hey, everybody. My name is Jack Polakar. I'm Head of Innovation at Climate Collective. I've spent the last 10 years working in early stage climate tech innovation and had been working with Climate Collective over the last 2.5 years and formally joined them over the last year to work very closely with the entrepreneurs in the network that we support, as well as starting to launch our thematic accelerators. So we just finalized our first cohort working with the World Bank on a green accountability accelerator, where we actually supported 3 founders working in the Global South. And so, very excited to chat today about CDR in this space and, share what I can, learn from others, and be able to participate in the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll turn it to Specios with Octavia Carbon.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name, as highlighted, is Specios Muthu, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Lead at Octavia Carbon. I've been with the team for about 1.5 years, and it's been exciting building the Global South first direct air capture company here in Kenya. So far, we are gearing up towards launching our pilot direct air capture and storage facility, which will be coming online and commencing commercial operations by the end of the year. And I'm excited to share insights about our journey and how digital infrastructure has been pivotal all through the process. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. And then next over to Neil. And then Shrey.
My name is Neil. I head up the partnerships team here at Isometric. We are a registry for high quality carbon removal and focus across a number of pathways. So enhanced weathering, where we also work with Alt Carbon, direct air capture, and various kind of biomass approaches as well. And aside from being a registry, we are also heavily invested in the digital side. So we have a team of about 15 software engineers internally, trying to build out new tooling and software for suppliers and verifiers to help make the process easier for everyone. So good to see everyone.
Thank you. And then Shrey.
Cool. Hey, hi guys. Thanks Bella for having me up here. Guys, I'm the founder and CEO of Alt Carbon. We do enhanced rock weathering out of the tea estates of Darjeeling. Our journey is a personal journey of trying to revive the tea estates that are family owned. In 2020, when the pandemic had hit, we took the decision to stay within the tea estate and try to revive the tea estates by creating additional sources of income via carbon credits for the tea estates. That's how we started this business. And we realized that permanent carbon removal is the way forward, and the intersection between agriculture and climate is what motivated us to start Alt Carbon. So far, we've already started scaling up. We have purchase orders from Frontier, NextGen, and the aim is to not only hit a megaton scale, in terms of carbon removal, but ultimately aim for gigaton scale, because that is when it truly matters. And as Neil mentioned, we're working with Isometric as well. So that's a bit about me, my background, about Alt Carbon. About me, my background is in chemistry and mechanical engineering. And we have a team of geochemists and geologists who understand rock weathering in the global south, in the best ways possible. Happy to share more details through this webinar.
Yeah, we look forward to unpacking that. It sounds like a great team. So thank you, Shay. So let's go ahead and dive into the state of carbon removal in the global south and what does that look like today. My first question is going to be over to the Climate Collective team with let's start at the state. What does some of the socioeconomic landscape look like in regards to carbon removal and digital infrastructure there? And then maybe, Jack, if you could also give just a little overview of what we're looking at today in terms of digital infrastructure.
Absolutely. So kicking off with the first part of that, looking at the socioeconomical landscape in the global south, there are a number of considerations that we need to look at compared to where other CDR projects have been developed around the world so far. We're really focused right now on starting to talk to more project developers who are on the ground in these countries, who are starting to look at the shift in carbon markets towards more durable removals. And, looking at the technology that's been developed, through some of the larger companies, Climaworks, looking at these large DAC facilities. What does it mean to develop a DAC facility in Kenya? What does it mean to develop a DAC facility in South America, somewhere in Brazil? And I think there are a lot of different considerations that can have negative or really positive effects on the local community. So at Climate Collective, we've been working on a number of research projects around communicating with the folks who are on the ground, the folks who have been building out these CDR companies and CDR projects, and understanding what are some of these co-benefits. And within the co-benefits, how do we look at who are the communities that are on the ground? Are these indigenous communities? Are these local communities? And again, how do we look at, okay, again, let's look at a tech-based CDR DAC facility. What are the energy needs for that facility? How can we develop those in an area where there's actually geothermal? How does that bring more money into the community and actually create jobs for the people who are already living there? Again, really needing to understand the difference between a developing country taking on, a new CDR company in a small area versus, developing a CDR project somewhere in the United States or in Europe. And so within that, looking at sort of the digital technology infrastructure that's being developed, we need data. We need social connectivity and social innovation around how do we communicate more effectively with the people on the ground. And so, we're seeing a number of, I would say, really exciting CDR companies coming out of these regions. And we're also seeing a lot of entrepreneurs looking at what infrastructure doesn't exist there, again, on the digital side. How do we help these companies interact with government? How do we help them interact with local communities? How do we help them interact with indigenous communities? And so, I think it's really great that these conversations are starting, and I think there needs to be a lot more focus on how do we quickly build this infrastructure before, the money and the opportunity from CDR, comes in and potentially has a negative effect on some of these regions. So I'll leave it there because I've got a number of points that I think we'll get to later in the conversation.
Yeah, we are lucky to be joined by two project developers today, so I think we can go ahead and dive a little bit deeper into these. So my next question is over to Specios and Shrey on what are some of the key opportunities and challenges that position the Global South to be a leader in carbon removal, working in your respective areas of India and Kenya. As Jack was just saying, Kenya does have the Great Rift Valley and ample like basalt aquifers as well as geothermal. And then Shrey, of course, so much of your work with local stakeholders at the tea farm. So again, what do you see as some of the key opportunities and challenges with this?
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. So with regards to the key opportunities that exist for carbon removal, we are happy that increasingly Kenya is being recognized as an ideal place for deploying direct air capture technology. And one of the key factors is renewable energy, which is abundant in most regions within the Global South. And for Kenya specifically, we have geothermal capacity, which is still vastly untapped and yet to reach its maturity, unlike other regions in the global north. Away from the geothermal potential, there is, of course, solar and wind, which can facilitate and provide clean and a sustainable way of powering these carbon removal technologies. Additionally, as Jack has mentioned, we do have this natural storage facility thanks to the geological formations within the East Africa region. Specifically, we do have the Great Rift Valley, which presents basalt formations that can lock away the captured carbon and store it permanently for millions of years with minimal risk of leakage. So away from that, another key aspect is we have a growing young talent pool, which is eager to engage in this growing green economy and bring innovations to the table. And this demographic will play a key role in advancing these novel technologies that are emerging in the Global South. And also, finally, we do have that community buy-in. Most of the communities here have witnessed the effects of climate change firsthand, and therefore they are willing to create a direct impact to incentivize growth of these carbon removal projects that are coming up within the region. So despite these opportunities, of course, we do acknowledge there are challenges, and one of the key challenges, of course, is financing. For so long, most of the financing within the Global South is directed to climate resilience and adaptation, and carbon removal is within the mitigation scope. So often there is that gap that needs to be bridged so as to advance carbon removals in the region. But yeah, that is one of the key challenges, which is sort of creating a barrier for advancing and establishing the Global South as a leader in the space.
Yeah, good. Just to add on to that, I think in India, how we look at it is that India has already led the way when it comes to avoidance-based carbon credits, with 17% of the world's carbon credits coming from India, around 3 million, 300 million carbon credits coming from India. And India has also led the way when it comes to wind and EVs. And I think how we look at it is that, from climatic conditions to geological conditions to meteorological conditions, India has these advantages that can help it, reach carbon removal at scale, at velocity, and with very, very cost-effective prices. And I think that is the true opportunity when it comes to Global South companies like Alt Carbon and Octavia Carbon, right? And that's something that truly excites us because, we look at it in a way that what can help us reach first a million-ton scale and then a gigaton scale. I think the challenge primarily for us is, in terms of most of these Global South countries, including India, don't have the physical infrastructure or the digital infrastructure to be able to do things at scale, to ensure that your science and technology is going hand in hand with your operations. That is a very big challenge, and we are focusing on actively removing that bottleneck while we scale up. The other big challenge also is the is the overarching ambition to really crack deep tech, to crack very high quality science, and ultimately go for those moonshots of reaching a gigaton scale, and ensuring in your head that you have a clear plan towards cracking them. Because we are focusing a lot on training young scientists, on creating physical infrastructure to be able to not only for us to scale up, but also to help a lot more and a lot other agricultural companies to be able to do carbon removal using our own science and technology. So that's how we look at it in terms of opportunities and challenges.
Yeah, I'm hearing similar things in both kind of areas with job creation at the local level, and then as well as you both touched on carbon credits, which leads into kind of like the next little exploration area in regards to market relevance, what you're seeing in your respective countries. Again, I'm saying countries here, recognizing rather than greater regions. But for you both, can you touch on carbon removal in terms of like whether like nationally determined contributions and if it's included there, or other kind of market considerations for your credits that are being developed? I think India, for example, recently had the Bureau of Energy Efficiency release a phase 1 sectoral scope under their offset mechanism for durable carbon removal. It's still in discussions. And then Kenya has had a lot in terms of other types of carbon credits, but maybe Spocio, so if you could talk about more durable carbon removal credits. Shrey, let's go ahead and go to you first.
Sure. So how we look at it, our stance is very clear that while governments in the West have recognized carbon removal as a crucial technology and critical resource, India at the moment, has that risk of falling a bit behind if we don't act quickly. And this is the reason why we also organized an India-wide conference called Future Summit, just last month, to ensure that we are actively engaging with policymakers, with bureaucrats, with bankers, with carbon removal startups, with venture capitalists, all in the same room, and ensuring that they understand the scope of carbon removal to mobilize climate finance to come to global South countries like India. However, we are very confident that while companies like Alt Carbon develops their own technologies and focus on cracking the most complex removal methods out there, India will also be able to, using the BE's protocols, allow transferability of credits under the compliance markets as well. And especially once the CBAM takes effect, I think India does realize the potential that lies in terms of these high quality carbon removal credits. It's just that so far within India, the market hadn't moved as fast as it has moved in the last couple of months, primarily because of companies like Alt Carbon coming up. And there'll be a lot more that will come up in India, which will ultimately shape up the market.
With regards to carbon removals being recognized within the national determined contributions for Kenya, it's specifically not an area of focus at the moment, but however, what the government is trying to do is establish a national carbon registry, which will allow tracking of projects like ours and even be certified under the principles of Article 6, which will allow the removals to be traded internationally. So these are the steps that the government is taking. We've seen a lot of support whereby there have been summits and conferences which are trying to understand the different private stakeholders, because for so long, as you have highlighted, it's nature-based carbon credits that have always been on the spotlight, but now increasingly that they are seeing this potential for durable removal, such as direct air capture technology, and the only way they can incentivize this is by creating these enabling policies. So while it's not part of the national determined contributions, they are taking the measures that will necessitate and also encourage the growth of such carbon removal projects.
Absolutely. Yeah, honing in on the Article 6.4, it was incredible to see the news come out this week on the approval of the mechanism. And so we'll continue to monitor that in the coming weeks and as COP29 continues to move forward. Shrey did touch on financing. So actually, let's go ahead and move over to Isometric with Neil. Neil, Isometric has done so much as a registry, now working a lot on digital monitoring, reporting, verification. I think we can weave in here how digital infrastructure itself can help to strengthen the responsible growth of carbon removal in the global south. And so My next question is, how is Isometric thinking about leveraging digital technologies to support projects with financing? And how do you see this challenge being different in the Global South?
Yeah, so one of the things that we always had as a general philosophy is that speed matters and that the ability for projects to get credits earlier is just going to be a very important thing. I think when we kind of came up with that, it was more just because it seemed like a good thing to do. But as we spoke to project developers more, one of the things that actually became quite apparent is you have a lot of project developers who are currently potentially financing off equity finance, but in the future are going to be financing off debt. And, debt carries interest rates associated with it. And so if you're having to go through an entire year without getting credits, that is going to increase the project costs. And that's actually accentuated in areas of the world where potentially you have historically higher rates of interest to be charged to projects. And I think this is something that is likely to be true as a discrepancy between, a project operating in, North America and a project operating in, a country like potentially India. And, what that means in practice is any delay in projects getting their credits is going to lead to a delay in revenue, which is going to increase project costs, which is ultimately going to slow down companies' ability to scale in the regions they're operating in. And so we've tried to put a lot of work into the ability for projects to, at this point in time, get credits, at potentially a monthly cadence. And what this looks like is actually quite different for projects. And I think, most of our experience in the Global South has come from enhanced weathering, which actually has slightly different kind of constraints around when you can credit. But generally, what we're trying to enable is companies to be able to submit their data, have it turned around to a verifier, receive the full amount of credits that their work has enabled every single month. And really, that pulls forward revenue, it pulls forward cash flows, and hopefully that impact is going to be highest in the places where you would expect higher kind of financing costs. If you go to our website, there's actually a calculator called like Project Finance Calculator, which allows you to kind of explore, and you can put in, country specific or kind of sectorally specific kind of interest rates and see how the pulling forward of these kind of revenues can actually impact projects. And it can be quite material. It can be the difference of, double-digit percentages to project cash flows, which I think is like a very meaningful thing for their ability to scale up.
Thanks, Neil. And then kind of like with that, when thinking about like data and standards and other kind of protocols for high integrity removals, what would you say are some considerations given specifically for supporting projects in the Global South? So honing in a little bit more here on the digital infrastructure component.
Yeah. So as I said, most of our experience in the Global South has been actually enhanced weathering. We have 3 different companies that we're working with across both Brazil and India today, and all in the enhanced weathering pathway. So most of my answers are going to be kind of in that context, but I think there are some generally kind of things you can extrapolate out as well. I mean, before we get to the digital infrastructure part, I think there is a lot of work to be done actually at the protocol level that can be different in these different geographies. And so, we'll go like too in the weeds on the enhanced weathering part, but I think it is illustrative. When we built out our enhanced weathering protocol, it just had a certain set of assumptions around what kinds of measurements can you get, kind of what climatic patterns are you going to be operating under. And those just weren't necessarily going to be true in areas, that have kind of typhoonal conditions or where the ability to even have a cold chain for a certain type of measurement is just much more challenging to achieve. And so what that led us to do is, speaking with project developers, Alt Carbon was an example of this, trying to understand what are the differences in kind of how your project would be operating compared to what this protocol is likely to be asking for. And then kind of after we understood what those kind of differences could be, I think one of our other learnings is often these types of projects in the Global South are much more heterogeneous than we would see in places like the US. In the US, one enhanced weathering project is quite often going to look actually very similar to another enhanced weathering project. Whereas in some of these other geographies where maybe you're dealing more with smallholder farmers or other kind of stakeholders like that, the projects are often a bit more heterogeneous in nature. But But so the first step on kind of expanding to be able to bring the same level of quality into these projects was kind of understanding the differences. Then we were able to kind of brainstorm different protocol requirements that we felt would, still bring us the same level of confidence in the supplier's actions, but generally in a kind of more flexible way. And I think this is one of the things that we've seen as a big benefit to having kind of in-house scientific expertise. These are often pathways that are pretty nascent. Even things like biomass pathways, kind of the biomass supply chains involved, you're often kind of seeing kind of thorny problems arise. And so having kind of internal expertise to be able to help projects understand how they might be able to come up with different ways of meeting a certain set of requirements has been kind of a big thing that we've lent into kind of over the past couple of months as we've been going through the verification process. And then on the digital component, this gets back to this enabling crediting to be effectively as easy for projects as possible. But as we start trying to allow suppliers a greater level of flexibility, and that still means we want to try and be prescriptive with what we want to see, but we are trying to enable more paths to crediting. That also needs to be reflected in the infrastructure we build. And so when we think about our enhanced weathering work, the ability for us to receive enhanced weathering data, there are going to be lots more options on the table if suppliers have a lot more paths that they might go through for kind of their measurements. And so on our side, it's been, again, working very closely with project developers to make sure kind of our backend, our DMRV system are able to receive lots of different kinds of measurements, lots of different regimes of monitoring, and then be able to kind of still flow that up to the verifier in a nice, intelligible way so that they can hopefully do their job as kind of easily as possible.
And then just to touch on that real quick, can you explain to the audience what DMRV means and what it does?
Yes. So I think we actually don't like the word DMRV, even though we kind of use it internally. Yeah, I mean, digital monitoring, reporting, and verification. So, monitoring, reporting, and verification is, everything that goes in from collecting the data to, corralling the data, all the way to kind of having that data looked at by a validation and verification body. The D part of this is a lot of that historically has been very manual. It's been sending an Excel spreadsheet, it's been sending, a ream of PDFs to someone, and that's been pretty burdensome on projects. And has also been like incredibly burdensome on the verifiers, which meant that their timelines have been slow. There's been like a lot of back and forth. And so the digital component of this is trying to standardize and bring technology into that whole process. So it's like hopefully a bit easier for everyone involved.
Absolutely. Thank you. We do have one question that's come in as which is usually preferable or more easily obtained for developers in the Global South, debt or equity financing? I'm going to go ahead and open that up to the whole panel.
Sure. I'll just maybe give my 2 cents. I think it all depends on the rate at which you're getting it. There's a cost of equity and there's a cost of debt involved. It also depends on what is the stage that you are at in your company's life cycle. A lot of times debt is not easily accessible if you've not been around for more than 2 years and you don't have the books to show for it. So you have to go through 2 financial cycles generally in a lot of different geographies to be able to raise debt capital. But that being said, there have also been a lot of exceptions on this rule, depending on you getting a couple of offtakes and having the promise of delivery locked in. So it depends on different parameters. How I would look at it personally and how we internally think about it at Alt Carbon is that ultimately there'll be a mix of both. And depending on your equity valuations and depending on your cost of debt, the interest that you have to pay, you have to create a tailored mechanism for the projects that you're undertaking.
Yeah, just to add on to what Shreya said, importantly for nascent technologies like DAC, it's hard to secure debt at these early stages. Ideally, debt is available post the pilot demonstration of your technology on field, and it comes mostly in form of sort of project financing. And also, in addition to that, there is also aspects like collateral that you can offer. So what's emerging in the current ecosystem is sort of offtake agreements, and also securing large offtakes, large volumes only can come past the demonstration. And yeah.
And when you say collateral, what kind of does that usually mean for the audience?
So collateral in general is sort of what the financiers or the debtors can take in case you're not in a position, or an assurance that you'll be able to repay back the money that they are offering, or even that there is demand for whatever you are borrowing money to establish. So in this case, like offtakes, because of course, if you think of things like direct capture machines, like there wouldn't be an ideal collateral, because where would you sell this? Maybe as the technology advances, people will start thinking of offering IP as collaterals, but we are still yet to get there. So what sort of financiers are looking for is that demand for whatever you are doing, given that you have already validated this technology works, but is there demand? Will there be revenue streams channeling from this money that you're asking to develop these additional projects, sort of?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Specioser. So with that, I think we can dive in a little bit more here of how digital technologies themselves can help support these projects. So I might turn this question over to Jack, specifically like thinking through different forms of digital technologies that can be useful in these situations.
Thanks,
Beyond
Bob.
financing.
Of course.
Thanks,
So
Jack.
I spent a lot of time thinking about this, so I may have, some different perspectives and some different thoughts. But I'm going to take it from a high level, and I sort of think about these things in three categories of within, developing these projects, within developing, the carbon removal landscape in the global south. I think about, again, the three buckets of how do we watch things, how do we understand things, and how do we engage with things? And, the how do we watch things? This is, sort of to Neil's point, the DMRV. How do we use satellite technology? How do we use on the ground sensors? How do we engage with local community to actually watch what's going on with these projects, whether it's again, DAC facility or a nature-based CDR solution? How do we understand what's really going on in any of these technologies, and to see if they're really doing their job? So one for me, the digital technologies, we've already developed fantastic DMRV solutions around the world. And now, again, to Neil's point, it's how do we adapt those for the different conditions? Because we can't just throw something that may have worked up in Canada, throw it down into, arid area of Sudan and say, oh, this is going to work the exact same way. And so, again, there needs to be some adaptation there of existing technology solutions. Now, the bucket of how do we understand things? This is part of one of Climate Collective's upcoming accelerators, which is AI and climate. Rapid advancements in AI technology and accessibility to AI technology is changing the way that we understand things. So I'm really excited for this new wave of digital technology companies that are leveraging AI to, very simply put, crunch a lot more data. And I am starting to see more companies starting to look at, okay, how can we use AI to adapt DMRV technologies to adapt to these new regions? And how can we create more, I would say, holistic infrastructure models that can help connect all of these different groups together? So again, I would say really excited for, a lot of these AI hackathons that are happening, where, again, we're having entrepreneurs who are looking at this intersection of AI and climate, and again, adapting AI within to the carbon markets. So the last piece is how to engage. And actually, this is the part I'm most excited about, is the social innovation piece of this. I think there's a huge opportunity in the global south to leapfrog a lot of technologies and learn from the things that haven't been going well in other parts of the world, or things that were hard lessons. And I think we can skip over those lessons, but the thing that we need is top-notch communication. And so again, this isn't like I would say, what the VC are looking to fund, but a lot of the technology that I'm excited to see are these social innovation platforms where they're connecting all of the different stakeholders. They're connecting the project managers to the companies who are developing the technology, to the investors, to the financiers, to the government, to the local communities, and making sure that we can again build up all the social infrastructure using technology as sort of the scaffolding for all of that. So again, I know that was high level. I can sort of dig into any of those pieces more specifically, but I would say we have a real opportunity to, again, sort of speed run past some of the hurdles that we've learned over even the last 5 years towards developing a really robust, strong CDR market in the global south.
Thank you. Yeah, no, lots, I think, continue to unpack in that. Lots of topics there. I'll pass this over to Shrey and Spezio, sort of what you see as some of the opportunities for digital tools to promote accountability, but also help with things like community inclusion and carbon removal projects. I know the Octavia team has done a lot with helping with local education systems, and then Shrey, a lot of your work in terms of working with tea farmers. So it would be great to start honing in on the community engagement components. But yeah, just again, what you see as some of the opportunities for digital tools to help promote this facilitation of community inclusion.
Okay, I can go first. Cool. I think at Alt, how we look at community engagement, it's a very integral part of what we do. Being fourth generational tea planters ourselves, Sparsh and I look at community in a very personal and a very it's very deep embedded into our culture. I think we always think from the farmer's perspective in terms of what could benefit them the most. In fact, in the tea estates of Darjeeling, they've been in a declining state for the last decade. Most of the tea estates are not making any profits. So it's in a the economy is not that great. We're trying our best to support them by giving them free soil nutrients. But we've created certain interesting mechanisms, like the Association of Responsible Deployers, which helps us in managing different aspects of the farming, noticing crop yields, noticing increase in total organic carbon, a couple of other parameters that matter to the farmers. The other mechanism that we've also created is Vigyan Krishi Sabhas, which primarily translates to science and agricultural town halls that happen before each of our deployments. Now, how tech can intervene with all the community activities that we do is primarily tracking how the different deployments that we are doing is enabling these communities in terms of higher crop yields. How are then these higher crop yields correlating to their their day-to-day lives? We do in-depth health surveys as well to understand how are different aspects getting coincided. The other bit that we also it's an integral part is how is the supply chain tracked? Right from when the basalt, when our feedstock leaves the crushers, to how it is transported, to when it is given to farmers, how the deployment needs to happen, how the land needs to be demarcated. Right, in India and most global south countries, the tech readiness needs to be there needs to be an education cycle for people to start using apps and dashboards. So whatever we create, we do it in the simplest way possible. It could just be a WhatsApp chatbot for people to interact with, but tech needs to come in and support the farming communities and support the stakeholders rather than having a friction point there. That's how we look at it.
So with regards to our operations and our digital infrastructure has helped, especially engagements with the communities, one key point has been aggregating the data and the feedback from the different community stakeholders, all the way from the elected community members to even the institutions that we are helping support. Another way has also been sharing data on our progress, including whether it's pictures pictures of the progress of where we are with the project and what are the next milestones, just keeping them informed so that they have a sense of co-developing the project with their needs, of course, in mind. And away from that, we have also been able to promote transparency, because one thing when it comes to distributing community benefits, some different communities, because we operate in a region with sort of 3 to 4 different communities, they are worried that maybe one communities might receive more benefits compared to the other. So that accountability in terms of the impact that we are creating within just them being able to see these benefits that are trickling back to the community, how are they being allocated, and even offer more feedback points or what are the pain points and where they feel like we need to advance or maybe pour in more resources, and how better we can even make them part of this whole process.
Could you elaborate on how you track that? I know a lot of other project developers are also on the line joining us today, who may be new to this in their own journeys, thinking about community engagement and like opportunities for co-benefits that come from project development. So again, how do you kind of track that? What does that look like?
So from the initiation, way back when Project Hummingbird was still a concept being developed in a kitchen table, we engaged the local communities of the prospective area. And of course, community engagement in Kenya is very different from how they handle it in the US and all that. So it involves first getting in touch with the community representatives, people like head teachers, principals of schools, just getting to get them because they are sort of the gateway to the local community members. So that kind of gave us a sense of who we should talk to. Once we narrowed down the optimum site where we are now deploying the project, we were able now to bring the community together and according to the stakeholder mapping that we had done initially, know which engagements are relevant. And often, so where we are operating in, it's often sort of a patriarchal society whereby women are even overlooked. So kind of encouraging these dynamics in the engagement whereby we track attendance of who has been present in these engagements and how better can we encourage those who are less engagements. So being able to track data on engagements and even the feedback points that are provided has been crucial, and that has kind of sort of informed the benefits plan that we have crafted with key points according to where we're deploying, being of course education being a major driver, and we have been able to start sponsoring local students within the communities and even kickstart an apprenticeship program where we are onboarding local community members to come interact with the technology here within our manufacturing site, which is located about 2 hours from the deployment site. And based on their feedback, because they also share this feedback with the local communities on how they see this technology operating and what are their considerations and all that. So it's a multifaceted approach, so much that we can delve in, but yeah, that's pretty a summary of what's happening. Yeah.
It's incredible and great to hear how intersectional all those variables are that you're tracking. And of course, great to hear the elaboration. For those who are joining the call, the Carbon Business Council does have the carbon dioxide removal responsible deployment training that we launched 1 year ago. So if you are on your own journeys and you're interested in learning more about how to go about doing things like community engagement, if you are going to be doing a project deployment, Tank from my team on here can go ahead and drop the link for our entire suite of resources that can be helpful again as you start your journeys. And Shrey, I know you had discussed tech transfer. Curious if you could kind of elaborate on that statement on like how to go about involving communities, but also leveraging efficiencies for tech transfer and what that may look like for keeping it in like a local region. And maybe some of the tools, for example, that can or are used by your team for this.
Sure. I think the key thing to realize here is that in India, agriculture and farmlands has been very fragmented. However, there are large farmland holdings as well, like tea, coffee, palm oil. We work with both large farmland holdings and small farmers. So it ranges between a 200 hectare size and a 1 acre size. I think for both of these sectors or categories, we employ different kinds of practices in terms of tracking data points, accounting for it, establishing that farmers understand what are the different effects that have been taking place pre and post deployments. But I think the key thing here is that what we realized was that agriculture in India has also been it's also witnessing a unique shift in terms of climate change. Right, the weather patterns have changed. The yield and the harvest cycles are changing rapidly, and we ourselves in our own tea estates have witnessed that. So the first thing was tracking how the change has been taking place in terms of these different cycles. The second aspect was that in terms of our own deployments, tracking and showcasing what do the data points look like in terms of soil conditions, in terms of crop yield, in terms of lots of other parameters that we track, but also parameters that make sense for the farmers and for the farming communities rather than on the carbon removal front. And the third part was also helping them through the farming practices. I think what we've done is we've created via the Vigyan Krishi Sabhas and Association of Responsible Deployers educational practices for farmers to be able to do better in terms of their own acreage of land, in terms of crops, in terms of how they even add manure or they add ag lime or anything else. So I think it is just a mixture of education, accountability, visualization. Those are the important aspects that we look at. A lot of it, as I mentioned, is makeshift arrangement right now in terms of the tech stacks that we are building. As I mentioned, simple things like WhatsApp chatbots work a lot better compared to complicated apps. And we focus on understanding how do they record the data points at this particular moment, and then creating just an additional tech layer on top of it. So, for example, if people are recording data on paper, we just created a simple OCR way of just clicking a picture of that particular page and ensuring that it automatically converts into an Excel format, which can then be visualized and analyzed by our own science team members. So we see tech as an enabler. We don't want to go very deep into it and create different kinds of systems, but we definitely see it as a very important part in the entire supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I liked how you were talking about saying it in a way that like local other kind of stakeholders can understand the farmers, for example, and aspects of sustainable agriculture and having it be both inclusive and intersectional. I know we only have a few more questions left. If you are in the audience and you do have further questions, please continue to put them into the chat and we will go ahead and read them aloud. I just have one or two left for the panel before turning to the audience questions, but over to Jack and Neil. What are some tools for digital infrastructure that you see as helping to build trust and transparency for carbon removal projects?
Absolutely. So speaking with a number of our corporate partners over the last couple of years, so again, this is a moving conversation, but we've done a lot of research on sort of the demand side of these markets. And one of the biggest pieces is marketing tools that elevate transparency. So, we know the corporate marketing practices right now are generally, doing a big sustainability report that goes really in depth on the practices they use and sort of the outcomes of these practices and initiatives. And what we've heard is they're looking for ways to have a deeper transparency into the practices that they're deploying. And so, that's where digital carbon registries are really valuable and really exciting of like, how do we show the life cycle of a carbon offset or carbon credit removal credit from, start to finish, so that demand partner can tell a really succinct story. And I think there are more companies who are coming out and working on sort of this marketing function as well as reporting function for auditing and some more of the compliance markets. So I would say that's a big thing. The other side that I'm really excited to see is more community engagement and actually making sure money from these projects gets back to the communities where those projects are located. And, we're seeing some really great younger companies starting projects around, how do we do verification with the community where then a story can be told that is still connected to those community members. So there's no disconnection where, greenwashing can happen. So again, I think there needs to be more pressure from from the policy side around this. So it's not just an opt-in, but we are starting to see more, voluntary contributions to making sure that there's transparency within the market.
Yeah, picking up on that point about the community, kind of making sure the benefits actually do go back to the community. So I was on a panel in Singapore last week with Joanna from Aruka Capital, who are a kind of biochar producer. And I think one thing that they've actually been trialing at the moment is a series of kind of micropayment infrastructure services to actually help share revenue from credit sales back with the initial feedstock producers themselves. And I think this is something that's maybe particularly relevant in these kinds of regions. I think she works in Indonesia and Cambodia potentially. But in those regions, you actually often have much more distributed supply chains. And so you need the ability to kind of both track and pay all of your suppliers in a kind of very kind of robust way. And in their project, particularly, the payment kind of comes post credit sale. So it's really about sharing back kind of credit revenue with those kind of with the people who are, initially were supplying the feedstock. The other thing I think I would flag is maybe similar to Jack, but on the transparency piece, where we're looking to build out a lot of metadata on projects to be able to help you outside of the quantification of carbon, show potential buyers or even show your own community what is going on in the project kind of behind the scenes. So what was your biomass supply chain? Actually, kind of what measurements were you taking? And trying to have that structured in a way that someone who doesn't have a PhD in geochemistry or a PhD in kind of agricultural science can go and look and actually understand what is, occurring at your project level. The last thing I'll say, just on this community piece, it's not like a high-tech version of digital infrastructure, but I do think having some way of recording and documenting, I don't know if you've seen Stripe Climate have released a series of kind of short documentaries around the projects they're working with. I think those are just incredibly powerful storytelling tools to, document and be able to share what is going on at the project that has the human component to it. Like a carbon credit is, I work at a registry. It's like, I like them. They're not the most exciting thing in the world. But the stories behind these projects are, I think, very unique to projects and are often what forms attachments both with buyers, but also policymakers so they understand kind of what's going on. So more documentaries is my other one.
I'm also hearing another webinar dedicated to this, specifically on policy. No, maybe next time. We do have a quick question from the audience. I know we only have about 6 minutes left, and then we will go into some of our final remarks. But the question that is up is specifically for Shrey, in terms of when you talk about community engagement, is it just with the tea farmers, or is there a wider movement that Alt Carbon is working on for other types of farmers as well?
Right. I think I'd already answered it on chat, but primarily, we're looking at other crop types as well, apart from tea. We already work with rice and bamboo, which are basically neighboring the tea estates. It can be scaled to other crops, other geographies. However, one needs to be very mindful of the temperature conditions, rainfall, humidity, the historic farming practices in that particular region, access to feedstock, along with lots of other parameters. We model carbon removal numbers before we do any kind of deployment and understand farming practices really well. So in case there are attendees who would like to partner with us, we can always help you think through the science and tech bit of enhanced rock weathering.
Thank you. And then maybe time for just one more. Is from Beatrice to discuss how or any suggestions on how to communicate the data that's monitored to the community, and then what the main information that local communities and buyers are interested in. This will be a quick one presented to the whole panel, and then we'll head into our final remarks before closing up.
Take a very quick stab at this. I mean, we've tried to make it so you can actually drill down into the data basically in a kind of waterfall method. So you can start with just getting a high level project overview. You can drill down in the emissions. You can see the data kind of linked to that in terms of evidence to try and make it, almost, pick your own adventure for how in the weeds you want to be able to get. In terms of the main information that local communities and buyers are more interested in, I actually think in some cases, particularly on the buyer point, this is also it is information about what you're doing with the local community. And I guess by that I mean, we talk a lot about co-benefits, and they have a lot of intrinsic benefits, obviously, to them, supporting local farmers, supporting kind of local communities. There's also a purely self-interested angle to that the buyers care about, which is if you don't get social license for your project is just far less likely to scale and develop and deliver the carbon aspects of the project. And so I think there's this like growing awareness that doing strong community level engagement is actually a really important thing to make your ability to scale as a project developer more robust over time. So I do actually think like a strong story for how you are doing that engagement and why you're not going to be the person the community blocks, because like 70% of projects that get community opposition kind of never get off the ground. I think having a good story about that is actually a very compelling thing just from a buyer who maybe is just after the carbon aspect of projects.
Thank you. Opening up that to any quick remarks from any other panelists on that one. Okay, perfect. Well, for the audience, if you do have any other questions as we're about to wrap up, please feel free to send them to our info inbox. We can help answer them or connect you with the appropriate panelists after the webinar. It has been really lovely having you all here today. I would like to do a final 1-minute remark as takeaways just from each of our panelists. We'll go ahead and hear from Shrey, Neil, Specioser, and then Jack, as Climate Collective, of course, is co-host on this. So Shrey, any final comments for you?
Sure. I think at Alt, our aim is to primarily convert the tea estates of Darjeeling, which are at risk of climate change, to the frontier of climate action through carbon removal. And we've come, I think it's been 2 years now since we've been on this journey, and 4 years since we thought about this journey. It's a long way, and a lot of partners, stakeholders, well-wishers will be involved in this journey. I think for us to reach megaton scale, we not only have to scale up in the agricultural communities, but we also require very high scientific rigor, operational excellence, and buyers to keep putting their trust in project developers like us. But I think we truly have a shot at scaling up carbon removal in a country like India, and that's what Alt is all about.
Thank
I guess,
you. Neil?
my closing thought here would just be, our experience has been for a lot of pathways that we work in, operating in the global south is not just a nice place to be operating in, it is often actually the best place for a pathway. So, I mean, Octavia is a great example of this. Like Kenya's geography in terms of energy and storage is just like a very great geography, regardless of the kind of country you're in. Enhanced weathering kind of absolutely thrives in tropical regions. A lot of the biomass pathways we work in, there are just like huge amounts of agricultural residues in countries in the global south. And so, our experience has been that a lot of these countries, they might have unique challenges around data collection, I think is a particular one, and traceability. But generally, those are problems that things like digital infrastructure can really try and help get over. And then you're just left with geographies that, for very innate reasons, are often just very good areas to try and do carbon removal with in general. So very optimistic.
Yeah, so as we continue this journey of developing the Global South's first direct air capture company, we do believe that digital infrastructure will play a pivotal role in getting the carbon removal space to where it needs to address the climate issue. And for that, we are always open to working and supporting different stakeholders who are developing these digital tools. I believe we have had conversations with Isometrics. There are so many people who are working in enhancing the credibility and transparency needed in the carbon removal space so that it can advance. And for that, we remain optimistic, like indeed, the Global South will be a leader and ultimately leader in the space. And yeah, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who has joined this insightful discussion.
Closing on our side, Bella, thank you for co-hosting this, and really excited to watch this space. And my closing remarks can be, especially from conversations from New York Climate Week this year, talking with some of the big financiers, some of the big banks. They are looking at the Global South. They're looking at the Global South for a lot of expansion within the carbon markets, within CDR. And I would say they don't always have an attention to detail when they're deploying their programs. And so it is the responsibility of entrepreneurs, of innovative companies to come in and build that innovation for the social good of the communities, for the durability of these projects, as well as durability of the removals themselves. If we just let the finance and the money drive this market, there are going to be some cracks in the foundation. So let's use the money as a driver, but make sure we're using community, we're using ecosystem approaches to really build this into a equitable market. So excited to continue these conversations.
Thank you. And I know we're at time, so I'll be brief. But again, on behalf of the Carbon Business Council, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today. Thank you again to our panelists and to Tank from our team for helping to facilitate, as well as to all of our attendees. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email us after. This webinar was recorded and will be shared later. And please keep in touch. So thanks all.
Thanks.
Thank you.